Bonjour à tous and welcome to another video. Today I'm talking about something that doesn't have a name, so it should be interesting. So in French, the word si, amongst other things, means if, right? So for example, we can say things like si tu travailles dur, tu réussiras. Si tu travailles dur, tu réussiras. If you work hard, you will succeed. And I have a whole video on hypothetical or conditional sentences like that one. You can watch that. We're not talking about that in this video. Instead, I want to focus on a couple of situations where si doesn't really mean if, and to be honest, it doesn't really mean anything else either. Fret not though, dearest French learners, for I am here, and I shall help you to understand them with nice, clear explanations and examples. So the first use of si that we're going to look at where it doesn't mean if is what I'm going to call the si explicatif, because it helps us to explain things. And usually this comes in the form of the following structure. Si blah blah blah, c'est que blah blah blah. Si blah blah blah, c'est que blah blah blah. Or you might also see si blah blah blah, c'est parce que blah blah blah. Si blah blah blah, c'est parce que blah blah blah. They both mean the same thing. So in this structure we have si followed by something that needs explaining, then c'est que and the explanation. So you end up with a sentence that's something like, if this is happening, it's because of this reason. Now what can be slightly confusing about this is that what comes after si is actually happening. For example, if I said something like, if I'm eating, it's because I'm hungry, it kind of gives the impression that I don't know if I'm eating, but of course I should know if I'm eating or not. If, however, in French you said, si je mange, c'est que j'ai faim, si je mange, c'est que j'ai faim, there's no doubt that you're eating. You're simply explaining why you're eating. I'm eating because I'm hungry. So let's have a look at a few other examples that I've found. So as I said, the structure here is si blah 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 c'est que, or si blah 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 c'est parce que, and I have a few examples of this, starting with si vous êtes là, c'est que vous avez apprécié le premier. Si vous êtes là, c'est que vous avez apprécié le premier. So literally that means if you are here, it's because you appreciated or you liked the first one. And I guess that kind of makes sense in English. But the important thing to remember is that si here doesn't put into question whether you're here or not. The person who wrote this knows that you are here, right? You're visiting the page. They're simply giving the reason why they think you are there. So I would translate this as something like, you're here because you liked the first one, or maybe, I guess you're here because you liked the first one. Now, of course, you could just say, vous êtes là parce que vous avez apprécié le premier. Literally, you are here because you liked the first one. But using si c'est que really helps to emphasize the reason. The reason that you're here is that you liked the first one. Here we have another example. Si je porte le voile, c'est parce que je l'ai choisi. Si je porte le voile, c'est parce que je l'ai choisi. So literally, if I wear le voile, which is a general term for a headscarf or a hijab, it's because I've chosen it. Again, she knows that she wears a headscarf. She's not saying if I wear one, I will choose it, or if I wore one, I would choose it. No, she's saying I wear one because I choose to. So again, we could just say je porte le voile parce que je l'ai choisi. That's absolutely fine. But again, this structure really helps to emphasize the reason. I wear it because I chose it, not because someone else told me to. We then move on to si le ciel est si grand, c'est parce que les avions ont besoin de place. Si le ciel est si grand, c'est parce que les avions ont besoin de place. So this is actually the title of a book, and I think it's quite nice. Literally, it means if the sky is so big, it's because planes need space. Again, we know the sky is big. We're not putting into question whether the sky is big or not. We're simply emphasizing the reason that the sky is so big. Of course, in this case, it's a bit of a joke because it's a book about planes, so the reason isn't exactly true, but basically it means the sky is so big because planes need space. Yes, we could say le ciel est si grand parce que les avions ont besoin de place, but it doesn't quite have the same emphatic tone as si le ciel est si grand, c'est parce que les avions ont besoin de place. Here's another one I found. I don't really know who wrote this originally, but it's quite a generic sentence. Si je t'aime, c'est que j'accepte tes défauts. Si je t'aime, c'est que j'accepte tes défauts. So literally, if I love you, it's because I accept your faults. Again, we're not saying if I love you in the hypothetical sense. We're saying I love you because I accept your faults. The reason that I love you is that I accept your faults. So again, we could say je t'aime parce que j'accepte tes défauts, or je t'aime car j'accepte tes défauts. That would work perfectly. But again, we're emphasizing the reason here. Si je t'aime, c'est que j'accepte tes défauts. The reason that I love you is that I accept your faults. And then finally, I have a few examples of my own that I just made up. So, si je porte un manteau, c'est parce que j'ai froid. Si je porte un manteau, c'est parce que j'ai froid. Literally, if I'm wearing a coat, it's because I'm cold. Clearly, in this situation, you are wearing a coat, but you're just highlighting the reason for that is that you are cold. Si j'écoute de la musique, c'est que je m'ennuie. I'm listening to music because I'm bored. And si je n'ai pas répondu, c'est parce que je ne sais pas quoi dire. Literally, if I didn't respond, it's because I don't know what to say, but probably more accurately, I haven't responded because I don't know what to say. So remember that whatever follows si in this case can be happening right now. We're not expressing doubt about whether the action is happening or not. So next we have what the daddy of French dictionaries, Larousse, calls si marquant la concession. Si marquant la concession. Si which shows concession, which frankly is really useless. The good news is that this one is really only used in the formal register. It's not something that you're going to say very often, but if you do a lot of reading, it's something that you're likely to see quite a lot. Now the reason they call it si marquant la concession is because essentially we're saying if this is true, then this is also true. It's a kind of comparison, and sometimes it also shows a contrast. So even though this is true, this is also true. And I think what Larousse has to say here is really, really useful. They say, cette construction, qui ne se rencontre que dans le registre très soutenu, est parfois analysée comme une ellipse de s'il est vrai que, s'il faut admettre que. So basically what they're saying is that if here is like an abbreviation of if it's true that blah blah blah, then this is true. Or if one has to admit this, one also has to admit that. And I think that's really, really useful because it's a little bit difficult to translate this structure because I don't really think we say anything similar in English. But if we replace the si with s'il est vrai que, if it is true that, or s'il faut admettre que, if one has to admit that, we get a better idea of what it really means. So once again, let's have a look at some examples. So this one is a little bit more difficult to spot because the structure is just C, A, blah, 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 B. So you might not see it coming, but by the time you reach the end of a sentence, it should become a little clearer. So first of all, we have si la Lazio n'a pas manqué l'occasion de renouer avec la victoire sur le score de 3-1, Mohamed Fares a lui aussi réalisé une très bonne prestation. So for a little bit of context, because I myself am not a football person, Lazio is an Italian football team and Mohamed Fares plays for this Italian football team. So literally this means if Lazio didn't miss the opportunity to return to victory with a score of 3-1, Mohamed Fares himself also performed very well. But again, we're not questioning whether the team missed the opportunity to return to victory because we know they did. They won 3-1. But again, we're saying if we accept that that is true, yes, they won, we must also accept that Mohamed Fares himself played very well. You could also think of it as if we're going to talk about the fact that Lazio played really well and they won, we also need to mention Mohamed Fares specifically because he performed very, very well. It is really difficult to find one specific translation for this, but hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea of how this structure can be used. If not though, let's have a look at another example. Si Donald Trump et Joe Biden ont pu exprimer leur divergence lors de ce premier débat en vue de l'élection présidentielle de novembre, la presse américaine est, de son côté, unanime. Les deux candidats se sont livrés à un spectacle tendu, difficile à regarder. So again, literally, if Donald Trump and Joe Biden were able to express their differences during this first debate in view of the presidential election in November, the American press is, for its part, unanimous. The two candidates gave a tense performance, which was difficult to watch. Not a perfect translation, but that'll do for now. But again, we're not putting into question whether they were able to express their differences during the debate. Of course they were. Instead, we're actually presenting a kind of contrast here. We're saying, although Donald Trump and Joe Biden expressed differences, they were clearly opposed, the American press, on the other hand, is unanimous. They all agree that it was tense and difficult to watch. Here we have another one. Un sondage IFOP pour le Figaro montre que si les Français et les Allemands sont majoritairement opposés à secourir financièrement l'Ukraine, cette hostilité est plus grande en France, 64%, qu'en Allemagne, 57%, où le souci du voisinage oriental est traditionnellement plus marqué. So I know this is quite a complicated sentence, so let's go through it slowly, starting with the literal translation. An IFOP survey, IFOP is the French Institute for Public Opinion, pour Le Figaro, for Le Figaro, which is the newspaper that this article is in, montre que, shows that, si les Français et les Allemands, if the French and the Germans, sont majoritairement opposés à secourir financièrement l'Ukraine, are majoritarily, or perhaps mostly opposed to financially assisting Ukraine, cette hostilité est plus grande en France, this hostility is greater in France, qu'en Allemagne, than in Germany, où le souci du voisinage oriental, where the concern about eastern neighbors, est traditionnellement plus marqué, is traditionally more marked, more noticeable. So basically what we're saying is this survey shows that even though French people and German people are generally opposed to providing financial assistance to Ukraine, that feeling is greater in France than in Germany. So once again, the C here is kind of introducing a contrast. Although French and German people oppose this, the French are more opposed. Or again, following Larousse a little bit more, we could say, if we're going to mention that French and German people agree on this, we also have to mention that the French are a little bit more concerned than the Germans. So if all of that is a little bit heavy, the final example is a little bit more everyday. This is taken from the website espagnolfacile.com, which is a French website designed to teach people Spanish. So here we have, en français, si la formule c'est que, c'est qui se met à la troisième personne, soit du singulier, soit du pluriel, en espagnol c'est différent. So literally, in French, if the formula c'est que, c'est qui is in the third person, either singular or plural, in Spanish, it's different. Once again, here we're introducing a bit of a contrast. We're saying even though in French it's like this, in Spanish it's different. So hopefully those examples have given you some clarity on all of this. Remember that that second use of C that we looked at really is only used in the higher, more formal register, so it's not necessarily something that you need to be able to use yourself. The most important thing is just to understand it when you read it. That said, to any university students, any of you taking a high-level French exam, or anyone who has to write in a particularly formal style, I do recommend that you give this one a go because it is a sign of a very high quality of written French. As always, if you have any questions, please do let me know. Thank you very much for watching this video, and as always, à bientôt! Instead, I want to focus on a couple of instances. Good. Instead, I want to focus on a couple of situations where si doesn't really mean if, and to be honest, it doesn't really mean anything else either. The explicative if, or maybe explanatory. I'm not really sure which of those is a word, so we're getting off to a great start. So with this one, remember that even though we're using the word si, which does literally translate to if, we don't really need to say if, because whatever follows si is actually happening.
Stop. What the hell are you talking about?
Cette construction qui... Oh my god, I can't read.